What was the next slide? There we go. This funding that was provided by the federal government is very much about enabling small to medium enterprises to cope with rising energy costs and to manage those better. And the ways that we're doing that is, I think the key word in the grant scheme is information grants. And so it's about developing high quality and credible information that the industry can access and use that's very relevant to your day-to-day business and strategies that you can draw on to reduce those impacts. So we've done the research into relevant innovations that we can share with everybody. We are working on delivering some benchmarking reports, which is very much driven by the industry and your interaction with the online measurement tools that have been developed as part of the project. So for those of you that haven't used those tools yet, and we're going to talk about them a little bit today, I really encourage you to get into them and input your data, because the more people that use them, the more robust that those tools will become and the more valuable the benchmarking data will be that we produce as a result of the report. And we've done lots of industry engagement around behavioural change and just having lots of conversations around the country. So far we've delivered our interactive web portal to host the resources, and originally this was sitting on the LPA website. It's now a standalone website all of its own, and we'll give you the address for that at the end of the presentation. As I mentioned, there are 3 different online diagnostic tools that people can use to assess their energy efficiency performance, and we'll talk a little bit about those today. And then there are fact sheets and checklists and operational guides, best practice case studies, and we've also delivered lots of webinars and training around a whole range of topics. So if you're quite advanced in the area of energy efficiency in your organisation, there are more sophisticated resources, and there are also entry-level ones that will help you just get started if you've not even really thought about how you can improve your energy efficiency and reduce your energy costs before. And so it's with great pleasure now that I pass you over to the capable hands of Mark Olsen from EC3 Global EarthCheck, and he will take you through how to develop a business case for your organisation, and also the sort of technical information you need to know about how to participate in this webinar. So thank you, Mark. Can't hear you, Mark. Mark?
G'day. Can you hear me now?
Oh, there you are.
There we go.
Yes.
I muted everyone, including myself. So I just wanted to say how grateful we are that you take some time out of your day to share in this webinar and hopefully share some experience with us. I will put you all on mute, and I'll get you to use the chat box, and I'll show you how to do that in just a moment, to share your experience along the way, because I want to hear from you as much as I want to talk to you today. We realise that there are a broad range of participants who have got all levels of different experience. Some of you have done all of the things I'll talk about today. Some of you have only done some of them. So there's a little bit to get through because we come at all different levels. And we've learned over our 25 years in this sector that it takes a whole range of different approaches to get the result that you want, depending on your circumstances. So there is no one size that fits all. So we'll work through a whole range of different strategies that have been used and have been effective in different circumstances. Some may work for you, others you may have tried and they haven't worked, and I'm really keen to hear your feedback, because as Suzanne said right from the outset, the whole process here is about sharing information, us sharing what we've learned from others with you, and of course you sharing with others. So what we'll do is, you've got a good sense of what the project aims are. What we're going to do now is get straight into what are the elements of successful business cases. 4 key elements we've always found to be extremely successful. Explaining to your business why they need to change, what they need to change, what the benefits from those changes are, and how you'll keep that change going, how you'll create a culture of change that supports the project or initiative that you've implemented. So we'll finish that up with where you can find more information. You can always stay in touch with us, and we would always love to hear from you. So what I'll do is I'll just put you on mute now, and if you have a question to ask, feel free to drop into the chat box and just send a note either to me directly or to everyone. If you want to make a comment about something that I've talked about, if you want to share your experience. So I will come to you at each of the end of the 4 approaches to successful business cases to see if somebody wanted to share a story on how they've done it and what worked for them. So it is an interactive session. We'd love to hear from you, so you can start to think about where you might want to come in and how you want to come in. I love this quote from John. You can be as smart as you like, but if you're going to convince people, it's got to make good business sense. And businesses think about their priorities in many different ways, which is why we have to come at the approach of building a business case from so many different directions if we're going to have success. There is no one way to get there. So we want to make sure you know where to find the information that you need, what's worked for other people, how best you can communicate those benefits, and talk about some of the strategies to build cultures of change in your business. So if you're on the phone today, you're on the webinar today, you already know why we need to change, but some of the reasons that we share with our clients that motivate them to make change is, of course, the most economically rational. Costs continue to rise. They're not about to go backwards. We see a small decrease in the fuel price, but in really big terms, the majority of our costs continue to rise. So in pure economic terms, taking action now makes good economic sense. Those cost savings come straight out of the profit margin, so they go straight back into the profit margin when you can make reductions in energy, water and waste. Today we'll focus on energy programs. This is an energy efficiency information, but there's lots of information available on how to reduce and save money in other areas. What we found over the last year and a half, as Suzanne was explaining, and working with businesses, is most people start with take an old piece of equipment and upgrade it to a new one. Effective, good strategy, capitalisation approach. But there's also some of the more challenging approaches include retrofitting, doing whole fit-outs of buildings rather than just taking individual pieces of equipment, implementing new systems like building management systems or BMS, and possibly the hardest, but in often cases the most rewarding part of creating change is actually behavioural change. And I heard a professor of electrical engineering talking about energy efficiency and the corporate world, and he said we've got to remember that technology is really only going to contribute about half of the savings that we need. The other half will come from behavioural change, and you can see that as clearly as day when you work in businesses on a day-to-day basis and you see how staff easily get around or override systems when they don't understand them, and how easy it can be that the technology can be misused and the net result is not a saving. So we work on a really simple premise here at EC3 and EarthCheck, and that is you can't manage what you don't measure. So you want to see real change, and we find that one of the best drivers of behavioural change is providing feedback loop back into the organisation on how much is being achieved. Now, oftentimes clients will come to us and say, but how do we know whether we're doing poorly or whether we're doing well? How do we know whether there is a real need for us to tweak our energy efficiency? And the best way to do that is, of course, looking at your own consumption over time and seeing how that compares to your utilisation rates. But what you can do is also benchmark your consumption. And you'll see from the tools that are available through the Greener Life Performances program, tools so that you can see how do I compare to others. And we find that to be often one of the greatest motivators for organisations, to be able to say it is possible, others are doing it. Not only are they doing it, but they're doing it so much better than we are. Let's set ourselves a target of getting to that or beyond that. And we find many businesses are only looking at their own consumption, and they might be holding or only slightly increasing and feel that they're doing really well. But when they have that first opportunity to see how others are doing by benchmarking, can make an enormous difference. Now, you don't have to go and do those yourself. Now through Greener Life Performances there are calculators available to let you see how you compare. And then the more complex model again takes us into building management systems. I know many of you who are on the phone, I've spoken to you before, are using building management systems to different levels, and we know that many of them produce an immediate result and a great return on investment. But like any great asset, the behaviour change has to go with it, and your team has to know how to make the most of your BMS if it's going to be a success for you. So there are two tools available if you want to do some benchmarking. For venues, the greenhouse gas estimator gives you an indication of how you sit on the benchmark. And for the events themselves, Julie's Bicycle and the IG tool also gives you a sense of where you could be improving your performance. So if you haven't had a chance to do those, as Suzanne said, those are available to you. And we encourage you to get on putting that information in and get a sense of how you can be improving. So you can see on that greenhouse gas estimator the baselines and best practice. So you can actually pitch yourself between the average and who's doing it exceptionally well and see where you sit at a glance by putting your information in there. So I encourage businesses to do that. It's a great way of motivating senior management and the operational teams to continue to make improvements when they can see how you compare to other businesses, not just how you compare to yourself over time. Now the data that you need to do that is all readily available through the builds that you have at hand, but we find many people find it difficult to estimate the uses in different areas. So inability to sub-meter or break down the data from big chunks into small pieces is a challenge we often find. And there are two really easy strategies to do that. There is a technology strategy, and sub-metering is so much more effective than it ever was, so much more cost-effective, I should say, than it ever was previously. But the other way to do it is by sampling, the sample methodology, monitoring usage, monitoring times, and allocating that over time. Obviously, the most correct and the most specific will be being able to access sub-metering information. And that can be retrofitted now and start to give you that information that you need. And it's sometimes that small granular data on a more regular basis that'll get your team motivated to make the change. But if you're going to be looking at capital cost, then your yearly averages or your yearly data will provide all that you need to have a look at doing some capital investment. So we'll move on to capital now, and then I want to hear from some of you on some of your experience in getting the data and building the case to do some of those what we need to do, some of those capital investment and big changes that are required to make your businesses more energy efficient. So start thinking now about who might want to share their thoughts, and you can just drop me a line in the chat box there. So if we're going to create energy efficiency, we're going to implement measures, we need to know what are we trying to change, how can we evaluate the options, and what measures might be needed to get us into a position to make that change. Often one change has a knock-on effect into other parts of the business. So it's important that you think about the change holistically. That means, how's it going to work with my team? Who's going to maintain it? Is the maintenance going to be done in-house or by a third party? How reliant am I on this asset if it goes down? What redundancy do I have in place? So if we've started with good data, we can't manage what we don't measure. If we start with really good data and we put ourselves in a position then that we can measure how much of a difference this investment is going to make, we can also then look at those knock-on or contingency impacts. So again, there's a whole range of resources in the LPA website, in Greener Life Performances, including some checklists to see areas that you could be improving that you might not have thought about, and a simple action plan attached to the greenhouse gas estimator tool, which does the benchmarking for you, which might help you to identify some of those areas you could make immediate change and find the greatest impact. Well, what we've got to do when we come to do that evaluation is it's not just about the pure economics, it's not just about how much does it cost per kilowatt hour. We've got to look at a range of pros and cons for each of the options. What we're going to need in both capital, how much money will it cost, but also what impact does it have on our resources. So what are those capital, labour and maintenance costs and how do they impact on us? Do we have those skills and experience in-house? And we've created a little template for you to do that technical evaluation. I'll walk you through that now. So you can see some simple evaluation questions around how effectively the solution addresses the issue. So if it's around peak energy consumption and it's a 24/7 consumption reduction, then you haven't gone with a peak load. So you've got to understand where your energy efficiency opportunities are. Is it across the board? Is it during peaks, highs and lows? We've got to think about workplace health and safety. How will we get up to make changes if they need to be changed? Who's going to do it? What happens to the experience of the patrons? So in terms of lumens, in terms of warmth or heat, in terms of the feel, what does that mean for the patrons' experience? Of course, we want to have a look at the environmental benefits, and some organisations have made commitments to environmental benefits. So I'd always encourage you to have a good look at what the organisation's mission, vision and goals are, and where some of these evaluation points come into that. How do you tie the safe workplace, the environmental benefits, the other community benefits, the artistic outcomes to what the organisation is aiming to achieve? So the closer you can tie it to those, the more likely your shareholders, your senior management team and your board are to see a connection to those. I think about something as simple as an airport investing in something like a major rainwater tank. On a pure economics term, there's no there's no economic benefit from putting a rainwater tank into a major airport. But as a good corporate citizen, which was one of their main aims, they could see that they made an enormous difference to their community. So sometimes the benefits aren't purely the numbers, and the case won't be built on the economic benefit alone. You've got to start to think about what it means for the business and its objectives. We talked about some of that technical skill. Do you have it in-house? Where are you going to get it from? What will that cost? How much time could you be down for? Is the technology well established? Is there somebody else in your location? So if you're in Kalgoorlie, is there someone else in this area who's picked up that building management system or that regulator of energy spikes, so that you can know that it is working with somebody else and that you can share the expertise and share the experience of working with it. Sometimes it's harder to be on the leading edge or the bleeding edge than it is to stay with something a little safer until you've got that established. So do think about who else in your region is using the technology that you might be thinking to use. And then, of course, you've got to be able to interrogate the return on investment. So when it comes down to the resources, the capital, the labour, you want to think right across the quadruple bottom line. You want to think about organisation, vision, mission and goals. You want to talk about economic benefit. You want to talk about social or workplace benefits. And of course you want to talk about environmental benefits. So what I'll do is I'll open up the conversation a little and see if there is somebody who would like to share an experience of finding the data to build a case and start to identify what are the best options for them, and let's share some stories and ideas. Someone from the floor want to jump in? Not just yet. So let me tell you about one of the small performance venues that we worked with in regional Queensland. They knew that their energy bill was high, but they'd never done any real benchmarking to see where they sat. And when we compared them to other small venues, they could see that they were 15 to 20% higher. That was very much constrained to a very small window in time when some of their major equipment was kicking in and getting started, particularly some of their outdoor lighting and some of the big drains that came in the peak load. Now they had a cafe and restaurant on site also, and it was kicking in at around that 5 o'clock, 5:30 time. So what it turned out to be was that pretty much everything was loading on at exactly the same time. The question was, do you change the technology or do we change the behaviour? And we modelled out the cost of much more efficient lighting and much more effective and efficient kitchen equipment that could bring down that peak. But in fact, the better return on investment was actually bringing staff in early and spreading the load, and then reducing that peak, which was reducing the load and the need to kick in to the second power. So sometimes the changes aren't just about getting the technology solution. Sometimes it is a balance between the technology and the way that you use it. Of course, what we always want to do is find a way to reduce total energy consumption. The first and easiest might be one that comes around behaviour change. So anyone from the audience want to jump in and share a story before I have a talk now about some of the data? Not at this stage? No worries. I'll put you back on mute. If you do want to jump into the conversation, just jump into the chat box and let me know. So let's get into the really nitty-gritty of the conversation. Nice to talk about how we build a case, but what does it actually look like when we're trying to demonstrate a case for making a real change? So how do we demonstrate those expected benefits that are going to come from a change? Just as I said before, three obvious tangible impacts are economic, environmental and social, but don't forget being able to tie it back to your organisation's vision, mission and goals and make that connection in selling your case. So of course you'll need to know how much the technology or the item is going to cost, whether that be a person or a piece of technology. What's the outlay or the capital cost? You'll need to be able to work out the operating savings, and you'll definitely need to be talking about maintenance costs. And that's one of the areas that we find people struggle to find information on, or they haven't built a case around operating and maintenance costs. From that you can talk about return on investment, and from there you can calculate a payback period. So in the resource that we've created for you that's available online, that helps you build the sustainable business case, it walks you through a simple table like these. So we've used these many times with businesses. They can be done quite quickly and they can be repeated regularly as more information comes to light. So this is a simple case of replacing 120 halogens with LED lights in a public area, working off 130 bulbs, going from 120 watt halogens down to 12 watt LEDs. Now of course on the most obvious case, the simple operating cost, there is a significant saving and you would get a big return on investment. What you've got to do though, before you jump in, most people draw the line there and say, there we go, based on the capital purchase and the operating cost, we're away. But you need to have a really good look at issues like cost of installation, because there's a knock-on effect. Sometimes the LED that you purchase can't work with the transformer that you're working with, and you'll need to actually replace the transformers along the line as well as the bulbs themselves. We've seen it too many times. Bulbs put into the wrong sockets, the wrong transformers, and they burn out, and people say these bulbs aren't lasting anywhere near as long as the manufacturer promised. So you do need to get a good understanding of whether you've got the right piece of technology for what you have down the line. What are those knock-on effects in terms of installation cost? Then you've got the maintenance cost. Are they higher or lower over time? They need to accumulate into a total cost which can be divided by unit before you start to look at payback period. And of course the obvious one that we do is around expected life hours. Now there are two ways to do this. The manufacturer will obviously provide you with an expected life hours. But like I said before, you're a network of performance venues. You should be reaching out to a range of local businesses to see, or other businesses in your sector, to see whether or not the technology that you're looking at purchasing is going to last as long as the manufacturer suggests. So create a network with each other, use Life Performance Australia to ask the question of other providers, does this last as long as it should? Ray Ellison's just jumped in to say we had this issue with the dimmable LED house lights. You needed to then use special dimmers that go with the lights to make them dimmable. So it's important that you look at those knock-on effects, and they're built into the cost. So don't just do it straight off the manufacturer. Ask the question of other providers. If you're looking at Philips 9.9 dimmable LEDs, ask the question, who else is using them? How long are they lasting? Are the lumens lasting as long as you expected? Are you getting the light as clearly and crisply for as long as you expected? What have been the knock-on effects? What transformers did you need to use? So get your engineering guys and get the providers of the technology to walk you through the whole connection and knock-on effect, and do your calculation of the full economic value, not just the immediate return on investment. Think more broadly than just the initial purchase cost. When it comes to measuring the environmental benefits, typically we're talking here about carbon, but don't forget about waste reduction as well. Longer lasting bulbs, longer lasting pieces of equipment, reusable pieces of equipment, rechargeable batteries, all of those reduce waste to landfill, which is both a corporate social good, but when you start talking about larger items, you're also talking about waste reduction that has an impact on the business. So when we take that LED and halogen case study into to doing carbon or measures of environmental return, there are a couple of things that you can use. Of course, the greenhouse gas estimator that's available on the LPA website will help you measure the carbon impact, and you'll get that figure from that. Often what we find though is boards, CEOs, stakeholders are interested in what we call a sticky figure, something that can be easily translated and easily related. So we'll often use comparable annual greenhouse gas emissions to things like energy use in a home, passenger vehicles, or rubbish bins full a year if we're talking about waste. So it's really important that you put that information into a bundle that your reader can really understand. Small, sharp, simple ideas are much more likely to get through. Straight financial savings are fantastic. Don't forget to bring the environmental benefits up in the same way. Ray's come back in to say that we are definitely still testing some of the manufacturers' claims on the lifespans of some of our items, and my answer to that, and the way that we work in other sectors, in airports, in hotels, is we encourage you to work together, to talk to each other about real life experience and what has worked before you take the figure and drop it straight into the calculator. So really important that you ask that question, who else is using these bulbs, who else is using this BMS, who else is using these variable speed drives, how long did they last, how quickly did you get a return? And that means you've got to be measuring along the way so that you can report back on your own efficiency, but also to be able to share that with your colleagues. So there's some great environmental benefits that you can communicate: vehicles off the road, waste reduction, equivalent number of homes in your community, as a great way of explaining to those decision makers who make the final call on whether or not this is the sort of investment that they make. Don't forget the social benefits. Like I said before, something as simple as an energy efficiency or water efficiency measure can be of real interest to your community. They see real benefit in these things. Often community groups and schools are really interested in seeing new technology at work. So don't forget that there could be some real social benefits and some real kudos in your community from making an investment like that. We see that staff members of organisations that are making a commitment, particularly ones that get their staff involved in making these decisions, stay longer, more passionately connected to their business, and much more loyal to the brand and to their employer. So staff members do care about the difference that you try and make in your business, and it's important that you get staff involved, you get them to understand why this change is being made, and you will start to see both cultural benefits and social benefits that come from that. A lot of organisations are nervous about talking about the initiatives that they've done because they feel that somebody might criticise them for not doing enough, or is that all that you're doing? Or how do you substantiate that claim? We'd go through a simple three-step process. Firstly, if you're measuring the impact that you're making, you could always share the results directly. So those tangible and sticky figures of the impact that you've made, both in sheer reductions and how that translates into households or vehicles off the road, can be substantiated if you're measuring. The second one to do then is the benchmarking, to be able to compare yourself with others in your sector. It can be a really powerful way of communicating for those people who feel that you could be doing more or should be doing more, that you are doing as much as others and sometimes more than others. And that's a nice way of bringing your shareholders, your board, your CEO up to speed to say, if we make this change, that'll bring us much more on par, or it might even put us head and shoulders above others in the sector. And then finally, getting a third-party independent recognition of some kind of the efforts that you made can protect your organisation's image and reputation and allow you to speak freely about the difference that you made. And there's information available about the sort of programs you can use. As I said, your staff do care. They want to be proactive. They are interested in environmental matters. They want to talk up your business and the difference that you've made. To do that, they've got to be involved. They've got to understand the impact of the change. So don't allow the technology to do the speaking for you. Translate the results of what the technology has done. Give that to your staff in simple, easy ways that they can then talk to your patrons and talk to your business partners about the difference that you've made. They're not going to remember the numbers, but they might be able to remember some of the simple comparisons or analogies of households or cars taken off the road. They may not remember the number of kilowatt hours or the financial saving. So if we can clearly articulate, we've got the data behind us, we've done the comparison or the ability to compare one and another, not just on the economics, but across the environmental, the social, and of course the corporate, then we've got to do the hard yards in creating a real culture of change within an organisation. That is easily said and hard to do, but our experience over the last 25 years is businesses who do simple steps like creating a green team, bringing together staff from across the organisation, even if it's only a couple of times a year, to have bottom-up input into where the organisation is going. Find more changes to be made, make more simple changes, find what we call the low-hanging fruit, and keep staff motivated. We've even seen organisations go as far as to say a proportion of the savings that are made go back into the green team to reinvest in new initiatives. And it's a really powerful way of keeping your team, the guys who are going to make the 50% of the difference, not the technology, but the people themselves, engaged in the conversation. So little tools like that. Firstly, top management has to make an overt commitment to doing this, and then they have to be willing to stand by the commitment they've made. Then once you've made that commitment and you're regularly measuring and potentially benchmarking your performance, you've got to then communicate that back to your board, your sponsors, your staff, your patrons, of course, and other stakeholders, and use those sticky figures on the difference that you've made, translated into simple, easy facts that they can get their head around and they can get a hold of to be able to share that with other people. Cultures are about sharing information, and you need to bundle up your information in the most simple and easy way, outcomes focused and deliverables focused, so that your shareholders and stakeholders can pass that on to others. Organisations need to know where they're going on this journey. What's our aim? So we say create a vision, and that's such consultant or business analyst speak, but to be able to set a target as a collective, as an organisation, to say that's what we want to achieve, and now we're working towards it, and we're communicating how we're progressing towards it, is so much more motivating than saying we want to improve our energy efficiency, we want to reduce our costs, so let's go ahead and do it. Set a target, make it bold, hairy, audacious if you have to, get in there, set a clear number that everyone agrees to, including board and top management. Then get people involved and demonstrate how the actions they're taking are contributing to the goal. You do need to empower employees. We find green teams a great way of doing that. Like we said, low-hanging fruit, quick, easy wins, but there's no use having quick, easy wins unless you're accumulating the benefits over time and communicating back to the organisation how much difference you're making and how much closer you're getting to your goal. I find one of the easiest goals to set would be either benchmark or best practice, and that data is all available through the greenhouse gas calculator. You have to celebrate your successes. You have to recognise achievements when they've been made, hit milestones, celebrate progress, and take a moment out to reward those and recognise those that are making the difference. So if you're not in the practice of doing that as a business, again, I really encourage you to do that. Get your green team together, keep the information flowing, and then as you're hitting milestones along the way to achieving your goals, then take a moment to reinvest in the team and reinvigorate them. And that starts to anchor those changes in the culture. It creates a culture of reward and recognition that doesn't have to be about big financials. It can just be as simple as recognising a great idea and being able to share back with the organisation how much difference that idea was able to make. There's a whole range of case studies about how other businesses have done this on the LPA website, Greener Life Performance's website I should say, prepared by LPA as part of this project. So jump in and have a look at those. A whole range of different ways that people are doing it, from competitions, newsletters, rewards boards, target boards. But you've got to keep that right in front of your staff and of your stakeholders. They know the progress that you're making. And of course, in your business, it's all important to make sure that that's not only not detracting from, but it's actually improving the patrons' experience of the place. So don't all keep it back of house. Help your patrons understand the difference that you're making in simple and easy ways. So who are we communicating to? Starting from the staff, up through our marketing department. Who's talking to the patron? How are we talking to them? How are we telling them what difference we're making, and how do we justify that? And then how do we get the management team to understand it and be able to share that as one of the successes of the organisation? One of the lessons we've learned along the way is that annual reviews of effectiveness simply don't make it through the management cycle. You need to be working more regularly to identify the differences that have been made and share those back with the organisation. You need more than one day in 365 to share the successes that you've done. So Ray, I might jump in there and let you share a little bit of your story about reward and recognition. Just turn your microphone on for 1 second. Apologies. There we are. So Ray, do you want to jump in and tell us a bit about the rewards program that you've been running?
It's not a very sophisticated rewards program. Country Arts SA, Ray Olsen from South Australia. Can everyone hear me? I hope I can be heard.
Yep, I just muted everyone, so they probably all said yes and you couldn't hear them.
In South Australia, we about 2.5 years ago switched our motor vehicle fleet to all hybrid vehicles. In fact, the progress on that is 99%. Now we've got one non-hybrid car left. Savings achieved so far have been about 30% reduction in fuel consumption across the board. The fleet has performed exceptionally well. We've extended the life cycle of the fleet from 60,000 kilometres to 80,000 kilometres, and we may still extend it further. The resale value on the first vehicle that went to market back in December was exceptionally good, so we're encouraged by that. We've run a couple of competitions now amongst staff to reward those who can take a photograph of the vehicle's instrument panel showing their average fuel consumption over the life of the vehicle, and the winner gets a coffee mug with a novel logo and piece of text on it. It shows a fuel petrol Bowser and the claim, but officer, I was hypermiling. And some of the people have quite taken to that. The best result we've got so far is a lady who was using a fleet car from Crystal Brook in South Australia and travelling around the local area of the state up to about 150 kilometres from her location, and she's been averaging 5.7 litres per 100 k's, and that includes extra urban and urban driving. We did a lot of analysis of our vehicles' usage and discovered that more than 70% of the vehicle usage was in urban areas under 80 kilometres an hour, with a lot of stop-start, and this is where the hybrid vehicles have been exceptionally good to us. So that's that one.
That's a great one. You know, I love some of the measures that you're using there, and I think it's really good to think about the life cycle of the product. So resale value, life cycle extension. What do you think your return on investment has been from the vehicle, the non-hybrid vehicle, which would have been cheaper to purchase? How long do you think it takes for your vehicles to get a return on investment for you?
With the 30% saving in fuel on average, the vehicles that are the best data I've got is the vehicles here in Adelaide. We were using vehicles that had fuel consumptions in excess of 10 litres per 100 k's, with primarily urban driving. We've reduced that immediately to, on average, 6.2 litres per 100 k's. The first resale, the vehicle sold for over 18,000 with over 70,000 on the odometer. That was a great result. We're using hybrid Camrys and Prius C hybrids. And we did a sponsorship deal with a regional motor vehicle dealer, and they've looked after us exceptionally well.
So Ray, just give us a little insight into how you convinced your organisation to go down that path. And then Trevor, I might come to you with a question about things that you're doing at Mirragong and how we can start to learn a little bit about that as well. So Ray, how did you build the case to make the investment in the hybrid vehicles? What was the tipping point?
The key elements were to make very good analysis of our usage and our fuel consumption, and then from there we moved on to doing a tender with vehicle dealers. We didn't have hybrid specifically in our focus. We were looking for vehicles, including diesels, for example, that would achieve the kind of results we were looking for in reducing our fleet operating costs. And whilst the Camry was a sort of mid-range vehicle, it suited our business needs very well in terms of boot space and comfort for distance driving. We're spread all over South Australia. So we then did a life cycle cost analysis on the vehicles we had been using and found a certain figure. Counting turnover and low resale value, we had a lot of four-cylinder vehicles in the fleet that weren't selling back very well anyway because they were small, and and you couldn't keep them past about 60,000 k's because the wear and tear on the vehicle with a small engine was difficult. So then we did a calculation using information from one of the vehicle dealers about what expected resale value should be, what the servicing costs were, what the insurance costs were. We got worried about battery life for a little while until we went and talked to some taxi companies and found that the batteries were lasting in excess of 300,000 k's. And so then we did some calculation looking at opportunity cost, the purchasing cost, the resale value, the estimations on fuel consumption. It was a no-brainer once we'd done that.
Fantastic. What I love about that story is, yeah, as you say, first you've got to start with good information on what your current consumption is. So with a vehicle, that's obvious, but it means logbooks in a lot of cases unless you've got a vehicle that's tracking that performance over time. in its in-house calculation. If you're using a different piece of equipment, if it's not hardwired, if it's actually plugged in, it's a coffee machine or something along those lines, and you want to say, well, we think we could get a better one, but we don't know what the consumption is. Most hardware stores will sell you a cumulative energy counter that you could put onto the unit for a period of time to get that information. You don't have to buy a sub-meter, but if it is hardwired, you want to have a look at kitchens or banquet rooms or public area lighting. Have a chat to a local Sparky about some sub-meter, and you can now have them put on just for temporarily, so you can hire equipment to collect information from individual circuits within your property, use a week's worth, a month's worth, a quarter's worth of data to then forecast what the rest of the year may be like, to give you that baseline information. So from good baselines, and then as Ray said, getting information not only from the manufacturer but also from third parties. You said the taxis provided you with some peace of mind on the battery life. That's one of those pros and cons that you've got to weigh up, and sometimes the answer doesn't always come from the manufacturer. It's good to talk to other users about how to do that. Build that case, and then of course importantly what Ray has done, and he's spat a lot of figures at us today. He's got the figures in his head, he's got the figures top of mind. So when the question is asked, was it a worthwhile investment, within a minute he's able to build a really strong case. So Trevor, I might come to you. You happy to jump in and share a few things, and then I'll open the conversation up to others?
Yeah, for sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly.
You can, yeah? Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you perfectly, Trevor. Go for it.
Oh, cool. Thanks, man. Hey, how are you doing? We haven't gone through the kind of process that Ray's gone through with his cars, but we have been making cases for things that people kind of accept already. So everyone knows that air conditioning systems cost you money, and if you manage it properly, you can reduce your cost there. So Steve, who's with me in the room at the moment, he goes into our BMS system every week and really reduces the amount of time the air conditioning is on to its absolute minimum. We also, when equipment is coming up and being replaced, everybody knows that incandescent lights are more expensive than LEDs, and so when the option comes along, we can make the case quite easily because we're going to an audience that understands these things. And slowly but surely, as equipment needs to be replaced or we need to upgrade this, that, and the other, it's quite easy to tell people that we need to use one type of equipment rather than another. We've just had our dressing rooms completely refurbished, and all the lights being put in there are all low energy lights and LEDs and so on. So that's the kind of thing that we're doing, and we're kind of looking at it from a day-to-day thing rather than trying to turn the world upside down straight away.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. So one of the things that we often hit as a hurdle, Trevor, is the piece of equipment you want to replace is extraordinarily expensive. So getting your owners, your shareholders and equity providers to buy into a major capital equipment before the thing falls over can sometimes be a bit of a challenge. But there's a number of strategies you can use. Firstly, as you said, once you know what the consumption is like, you're tracking the BMS, you're seeing where you're at, you're making as much efficiency change as you can through behaviour change, monitoring, reducing, and keeping an eye then on that consumption and how that compares to the manufacturer's recommendation on a new piece of equipment. Allows you then to track over time how long it'll take for the savings then to kick in to cover the capital cost. But the flip side of that is ideas like energy performance contracting, where you can work with a partner provider who wants to reduce the cost or offset the cost of the new piece of equipment with the predicted energy savings. So there's some information here in this presentation, but also in the management guide and on the website about the Energy Efficiency Council and the information they have on energy performance contracting. So I'd love to hear if anyone's doing anything different. Justin, do you want to chime in and talk to us about how you're using the BMS to understand costs through your business? Justin Murphy, do you want to chime on in and tell us a bit more about
I might actually pass on that one.
Have I got you?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, fantastic. Go for it.
Hello? Look, we're not quite up to the point of tracking costs yet, but we certainly have the capability within our BMS to look at certain meters and certain areas. We've just gone through the process of upgrading our BMS system, and we're hoping, in conjunction with the Cyber Centre, who we share a lot of our plant with, that we'll be able to get a better idea of our energy use and who's using it and where the costs go to.
Fantastic. Yeah, so BMSs aren't set and forget. You've got to work them. You've got to squeeze as much out of them as you can. Sometimes the information can be a bit overwhelming with the level of content that comes out. That's why we use some of the benchmarking tools to get a sense of where we could be or where we should be, and then use the BMS for some of those fine refinements. So what I might do is bring this section to a close. Oh yeah, R22, that's an interesting one, Ray. We'll, I'd say most people would have moved on with the R22, but we'll see where others are going on that one. But where to from here? So we produced a little management guide which is available from the Greener Light Performances website, greenerlightperformances.com.au, and the management guide is there, and it covers most of the things that we covered today. It's got information about energy performance contracting, and there's a link in this presentation through to the EEC website where you can have a look at how some of the larger suppliers might be able to help you to reach your goals. And like I said from the outset, if you have any questions at all, Suzanne, myself, or Lisa would be happy to answer those for you. So our information is there on the screen. Feel free to take a screen capture, email us, or jump onto the website, and you can contact us through greener@lightperformances.com.au. Jump onto the social media and tell us more of your stories. So thanks so much for participating today. Brad's suggestion, if we can send out the presentation, I'd be more than happy to PDF the presentation, Brad, and send it out to everyone who was involved. So feel free to use that information and share it with others. Really appreciate your time, and again, feel free to reach out to us anytime, and good luck with your next step. All the best.
Thanks, everyone.
See you guys.
Thank you. If I knew that, it would have happened some time ago.